Hello, welcome to Culture TV and to our online program, Let's Speak Russian. This is lesson 2. So if you remember, at the end of the first lesson, there was a short exercise. And I hope you were able to complete it because right now we're going to take a look at the answers to it. There were 5 words that you had to try to pronounce. Here they are. And if you also managed to find their translations, that's excellent. So, here's the first word. Mat. Mat. Let me remind you that in Russian, vowel sounds are sharper and more open. So make sure that you are bearing that in mind when pronouncing these words. Mat. Alright? And this word has 2 translations. One is checkmate in chess, and the other is foul language. Here's the next word. Koma. Koma, which means a coma. Koma. That was followed by kamok. Kamok, which means a lump, as in a lump of dirt, for instance. The fourth word was kto. Kto. Maybe you find it hard to combine those 2 consonant sounds at the start, kt, but just try your best. Kto, and this means who. And finally we had tot. Tot, which means this or this one. Tot. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too bad. And now that we've learned 5 new words, we can already start forming phrases like tot kot, that cat, tot kamok, that lump. There we go. Now you may be wondering about the pronunciation of the third word, kamok. Do you hear anything special? Kamok? Why is it that the second letter O is pronounced as if it's a letter A? Kamok. Clearly we can see it's a letter O. So what's happening? And that's a very good question to ask because it brings up quite an important point about phonetics in Russian. So without going into too much detail, we are just going to look at this briefly now. It's all got to do with something that we call stress. And stress is the verbal emphasis that you place on a particular syllable in a word. It's the syllable that you put slightly more effort into pronouncing. It's the one that you make clear, the one that you emphasize. Take, for example, London. It's the first syllable that we're emphasizing. London, right? We don't say London. That's different. That's not a word, in fact. We say London. Same goes for Moscow. In this word, hello, the stress is on the second syllable, so we're emphasizing the second syllable instead. And this is what we call stress. We have it in English, it's just that it's not as important as it is in Russian. So we can see that the position of stress changes from word to word. There are very long words often that might have several syllables and only one of them will be stressed. And depending on which one you stress, the pronunciation of the word will change. And it turns out that in Russian, changing the position of the stress can actually change the meaning of the word. That's not that common, but definitely something to bear in mind. What's more important is that sometimes there are vowels that are part of syllables which are not stressed that change their pronunciation. They undergo what we call a reduction. They get reduced. So there are some vowels that, when part of an unstressed syllable, change their pronunciation. They get reduced. And the letter O is one of them. So if we go back to the homework and we have a look at the third word, kamok, it turns out, as you have probably noticed by now, I hope, that it's the second syllable that we're stressing, kamok, and that therefore means that the first syllable, ko, will have an unstressed vowel. So that first letter or is going to be reduced. And by reduced, we mean that it becomes more of an ah sound. It's a weaker version of an or. You don't need to put in as much effort, if you like. That's why we say reduced. Therefore, the pronunciation is kamok. All right? And to denote the position of the stress, we use this accent sign. So if you see a vowel in Russian with this accent above it, you know that that's the one we're stressing. This does exist in general standard Russian sometimes, but only really when the position of stress can cause some ambiguity. We, however, are from now on going to use this almost all the time so that we're all happy with where the stress is in a particular word. So when you look at this, you know that because it's the second syllable that is being stressed, the first one is unstressed, and therefore the or vowel in that syllable changes its pronunciation. It undergoes a reduction. There are other letters in Russian apart from the letter or that undergo this type of change in pronunciation, but we'll talk about that more later. For now, the takeaway message is that the letter or changes its pronunciation to more of an ah sound when in an unstressed syllable. I hope that's not too complicated. It's not supposed to be a hard concept, but if you've not understood that fully, don't worry about it. That's not the most important point in this lesson. What we're most concerned about is learning some more letters of the alphabet. So let's do that now. Here is the alphabet, and highlighted in blue are the 5 letters that we saw last time. These are the true friends, right? These are the letters that look and sound exactly the same as in English. Now it's time for us to make some new friends. So that's to say we're going to look at some letters which have familiar sounds in English, but just look differently in Russian. There are quite a few of them, but we're going to start with 5 of them today. And here they are. So here's the first letter. It is B. B. The Russian letter B, which makes the B sound. So the equivalent of the English letter B. That's what we mean by a new friend. So we have this sound in English, B. It's just that the letter looks a bit different. And so we now need to get used to associating the appearance, if you like, of this letter with its sound. And by that, of course, we're going to do some practice. So here is the first word. Bak. Bak, which is a tank. The next word is bok. Bok. And this means an edge. Make sure you're repeating all of this out loud. Bok. Yes, very good. Now here's the next one. Notice that here we have 2 syllables now, and because of this little accent symbol at the top, we know that it's the first one that's being stressed. So that letter or is going to be clearly pronounced. There are no more letter or in this word to worry about, so we don't need to think about any reduction. The pronunciation will therefore be bomba. All right, bomba. Try this yourself now. Excellent, bomba, which of course is a bomb. Now, thought experiment. What would happen if we were to put the stress on the end? So let's move this accent symbol on the ah at the end. How do you think the pronunciation would change? Well, we still have 2 syllables, but because it's the second one that's being stressed now, the first one will, by definition, be unstressed. And because we have a letter or inside that unstressed syllable, it's going to be reduced. So if this word were to exist, it doesn't, it would sound like bamba. Bamba. Do you notice the difference? Bomba, bamba. All right? We're of course only interested in bomba. And the last word for this letter is tabak. Tabak. Repeat after me. Tabak. Yes, very good. Well done. Tabak. As you can see, when it's the letter A, nothing really changes. It's the same as in English. It's just that one of the syllables will be more emphasized than the other. It's only when you have the letter O that you actually need to think about what's going to happen to the pronunciation. Okay, now let's have a look at the next letter. This is G. G, which makes the G sound and is therefore the equivalent of the English letter G. Here's one example. Mag. Mag, which is a magician. And then we have another word, gamma. Gamma, which is a scale in music. Gamma. And do notice that letters in Russian can also be doubled. It's mainly consonants that you see this happen to. And the principle is exactly the same. You just lengthen the sound a little bit. Gamma. All right? Okay, no more words for this letter. Let's move on to the next one. This is the Russian letter D. D. Okay, this makes the D sound and is therefore the equivalent of the English letter D. This looks quite different, so let's get used to it. Let's practice reading some words. Here's the first one. Why don't you try this yourself? Excellent. Dom. Dom. Again, make sure to get those vowel sounds nice and clear. Dom. Well done. This is a house. The next word is da. Da, which as you may know means yes. Then we have moda. Moda. And this means fashion. Moda. Very good. Now let's have a look at this word. There are 3 syllables here. It's the second one that's being stressed. Notice how the first one contains a letter O. So I hope you've worked out what's going to happen. How do you think we're going to pronounce it? Yes, fantastic. Dagatka. Dagatka. All right? Dagatka. The letter O in this word has been reduced. Dagatka. And this means a guess. Very good. Now let's move on to the next letter. This is L. L, which makes the L sound. So this is the Russian version of the letter L. The first word is lop. Lop, which is your forehead. Lop. Make sure to keep saying these words out loud. The next example is lotka. Lotka. Excellent. Lotka. This is a boat. Why don't you have a go at this one? Yes, that's right. Lato. Lato. Again, there are 2 syllables. It's the second one that's stressed, so the first one is unstressed. So we perform a reduction on the first letter O. Lato, which is how Russians call the game of bingo. And finally, we have this slightly tricky word. Let me pronounce it for you. It's kolokol. Kolokol. Listen again. Kolokol. This is a church bell. 3 syllables. All of them contain the letter O, but it's the first one that we're stressing. Therefore, both of the other ones have to be reduced. So it's kolokol. Okay? Try repeating that yourself now. Yes, very good. Kolokol. And now let's move on to the final letter for this video. It's P. P. You may have recognized that this looks quite similar to the Greek letter pi. So yes, this is indeed the equivalent of the letter P. As you might know, there has been quite a bit of influence on the Cyrillic alphabet from Greek, which is why you can see some similarities. So here's our first word, papa, papa, which is dad. And while we're here, we might as well learn mum. That will be mama, mama, okay? Then we have потоп, потоп. This is a flood, потоп. Now it's your turn to try this one. Brilliant. Полка, полка. This is a shelf. And finally we have потом, потом. Let me hear you say that. Yes, that's right. Потом. Very good. Потом. Again, hopefully you remember the whole principle with reduction there. Alright then, that's 5 more letters ticked off. I think it's time for you to practice them in a bit of homework. So again, same idea. I'm going to give you 5 words. I'm also going to give you the stress. It's now up to you to try to pronounce these aloud. And we'll take a look at the answers next time. If you have any questions at all, then please feel free to ask in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.